Hey guys, tonight we're not just looking at history, we're stepping directly into it, into the softly lit world of an ancient Egyptian evening. Imagine, if you will, the day's heat finally surrendering to a gentle Nile breeze, and the subtle preparations beginning for the night, a night where beauty, protection, and a touch of magic all came from a small, dark pot. You find yourself standing, almost transparently, within the courtyard of a modest, mud brick home, somewhere not too far from the lifeblood of this land, the great River Nile. The last slivers of the sun are painting the western sky in hues of bruised orange and soft violet, colors that will soon be swallowed by the deep indigo of the desert night. It's that liminal time, the pause between the frantic work of daylight under Ra's unwavering gaze and the quiet mysteries of the moonlit hours. The air, still warm from the day, carries a blend of scents, the dry dust of the desert, a faint whiff of cooking fires from nearby homes where lentils or perhaps a bit of fish are simmering, the damp, earthy smell of the Nile itself, a constant reminder of fertility in an otherwise arid land, and perhaps, if you inhale deeply, the faintest trace of incense already beginning to curl from a neighbor's offering. There's a gentle hum of activity winding down. Children's laughter, a little more subdued now, echoes from a nearby alleyway. You hear the soft lowing of a cow being settled for the night, the occasional bark of a village dog, sounds that have probably filled Egyptian evenings for millennia. If you were actually here, by the way, and not a comfortable, time-traveling observer, your chances of surviving your first week without succumbing to some delightful waterborne parasite from that picturesque Nile would be, shall we say, character building. Modern plumbing is a gift, truly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's always nice to know who's drifting off with us. And while you're at it, perhaps you could type your current location and local time into the comments below. It's fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from, creating this little global community of sleepy history enthusiasts. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You watch as the family within this particular home begins to turn inwards. The head of the household, a craftsman perhaps, his hands stained with the day's honest labor, maybe he's a potter, or a carpenter, or even a scribe who spent his hours wrestling with hieroglyphs, is washing the dust from his feet. His wife, her movements efficient and practiced, is clearing away the remnants of the evening meal, simple clay dishes that are surprisingly elegant in their utility. Oil lamps, small, unassuming clay bowls with a wick floating in castor oil or perhaps sesame oil, are being lit, casting flickering, dancing shadows on the whitewashed walls. These tiny flames are the primary source of light, creating an intimate, almost cocoon-like atmosphere. It's a far cry from our own brilliantly lit nights, and you realize how much the darkness would have shaped their perception of the world, making these little pools of light all the more precious. The home itself is probably a standard design for common folk, a few rooms, perhaps a central open area for some light and air, and a flat roof. This flat roof, by the way, was prime real estate. It wasn't just for storage, it was often used for sleeping on hot nights, for socializing, and for certain household chores. Imagine lying up there, the vast, star-dusted canopy of the Egyptian sky above you, a sight largely undiluted by the light pollution that veils it from many of us today. It's a well-known historical fact that ancient Egyptians were keen astronomers, charting the stars for agriculture, religion, and timekeeping, and it's easy to see why with such a clear celestial display. As the evening deepens, the sounds from outside become more muted. The crickets and other night insects begin their chorus, a soundtrack to the approaching darkness. Inside, the focus shifts. This isn't just about preparing for sleep in the practical sense of laying out mats or tidying up. There's another layer to it, a ritualistic aspect that permeates daily life in ancient Egypt, even in the humblest of homes. The gods are not distant entities here, they are woven into the fabric of existence, present in the rustle of the reeds by the riverbank, in the heat of the sun, and yes, even in the nightly preparations. You might notice a small niche in a wall, perhaps with a tiny, crudely carved figure of Biz, the dwarf god, a protector of households, childbirth, and all-around good luck charm, despite his rather fearsome grimace. Or maybe a worn amulet of Tauret, the hippopotamus goddess, another guardian of mothers and children, hangs nearby. These weren't just decorations, they were active participants in the home's spiritual well-being. And it's within this context of everyday magic and divine presence that the nightly ritual involving Khol will soon begin. The very air seems to settle, anticipation building not for a grand ceremony, but for a personal, almost sacred act of self-care and protection. The day's grime is one thing, but the unseen forces, the little mischievous spirits or the lingering glare of an envious eye, these too needed to be addressed. It's a matter of debate among Egyptologists just how much of daily ritual was driven by genuine fear versus deeply ingrained tradition or even a form of preventative spiritual hygiene, but the practices themselves are undeniable. You see a small wooden stool being placed near one of the flickering lamps. A collection of items is brought out, carefully, almost reverently. A small, perhaps intricately carved, pot. A slender stick of wood, ivory, or bronze. And a shallow dish or palette. These are not the tools of a grand temple ritual, but they are no less significant in the life of the individual. The light catches the rim of the pot, hinting at the dark, precious substance within. This is the domain of personal magic, where the boundary between the cosmetic, the medicinal, and the spiritual becomes wonderfully, soothingly blurred. The children, if there are any still awake, might watch, absorbing the ritual, learning the gestures and the importance of this nightly routine. It's how traditions are passed, not through formal instruction always, but through quiet observation, through the rhythm of daily life. The slight scrape of the applicator against the side of the Khol pot, the focus gaze in a polished bronze mirror, these become ingrained memories. Think about the quiet of this moment. No distant traffic hum, no blare of a television, no glowing screens demanding attention. Just the soft sounds of the household, the chirping of insects, the gentle breeze carrying the scent of the Nile. It's a world away, yet the human impulse to prepare, to protect, to adorn, feels remarkably close. This wasn't about vanity in the modern sense, or at least, not solely about vanity. It was a practice steeped in a worldview where the seen and unseen worlds were deeply interconnected. One rather quirky, lesser-known tidbit about Egyptian homes is that many had a specific area, sometimes a slightly more decorated or cleaner corner, implicitly understood as the reception area for guests, even if the home was tiny. It was all about presenting the best possible, albeit humble, face to the outside world, even if that world only stepped just inside your door. This concern for presentation, for how one was perceived, subtly ties into the care taken with personal appearance, including the application of Khol. The shadows lengthen, and the orange glow of the lamp seems to deepen, making the surrounding darkness feel even more profound. The world outside the small circle of light shrinks, and the focus becomes internal, personal. The river flows on, as it always has, a silent, powerful witness to countless such evenings, to generations performing these same, ancient rites. You feel the day truly ending now, the last vestiges of its energy receding, making way for the stillness and introspection that the night, and the Khol ritual, will bring. It's a slow, deliberate shift, a gentle descent into a different state of being, guided by the soft light and the ancient rhythms of life along the Nile. The very foundations of the home, sun-baked bricks made from Nile mud and straw, seem to exhale the day's warmth, contributing to the soporific atmosphere. You can almost feel the coolness of the desert night beginning to press against the outer walls, a reminder of the stark duality of the Egyptian landscape, the fertile strip of the valley versus the vast, barren wilderness beyond. And it's this duality, this constant interplay of protection and vulnerability, that underscores so many of their daily practices. The small pot, the one you saw being brought out with such care, now sits bathed in the warm lamplight. It's more than just a container for a cosmetic, it's a vessel holding a substance deeply interwoven with the spiritual fabric of ancient Egypt. This dark powder, this Khol, isn't merely for enhancing beauty in the way you might think of a modern eyeliner pencil hastily applied before a morning commute. No, for the ancient Egyptians, Khol was a powerful conduit, a daily ritual that connected them to the divine, offered protection, and affirmed their place in a cosmos teeming with gods and unseen forces. Its application was an act dense with meaning, a quiet prayer whispered not with words, but with a gesture. Imagine the woman of the house, or perhaps an older daughter, now taking up the slender applicator. Her movements are unhurried, imbued with a sense of purpose that transcends simple vanity. As she dips the applicator into the Khol pot, you understand that she's not just preparing to line her eyes. She's invoking ancient protections, drawing upon a tradition that stretches back into the misty origins of Egyptian civilization. The khol itself, primarily made from finely ground galena, a natural mineral form of lead sulfide, which gives it that characteristic dark gray or black hue, was seen as possessing inherent magical properties. Its very darkness was symbolic, perhaps representing the fertile black silt of the Nile, Kemet, that black land that sustained all life, or the protective darkness of the night sky where the stars charted destinies. This connection to the divine is paramount. The Egyptians saw the eyes as windows to the soul, vulnerable points where malevolent spirits or ill fortune, often personified as the evil eye, could enter. Applying khol was like drawing a sacred boundary, a protective ward around these precious portals. The most famous divine association is, of course, with the god Horus. You've likely seen his iconic symbol, the Wadjet eye, or Eye of Horus, a stylized human eye with the markings of a falcon. This symbol represented healing, protection, and royal power. According to myth, Horus lost his eye in a battle with his uncle Set, the god of chaos and deserts. The eye was later magically restored by Thoth, the god of wisdom and magic, or sometimes by Atha, the goddess of love and beauty. This restored eye became a potent amulet, and the act of outlining one's own eyes with khol was, in a way, an emulation of Horus, an invocation of his wholeness and protective power. So, every time someone drew that dark line around their eye, they were, in a small way, reenacting a divine drama of healing and triumph over chaos. Not bad for a morning routine, beats just trying to get your winged liner even, I'd say. It's a well-established historical fact that khol has been found in ancient Egyptian tombs dating back to the predynastic period, long before the pyramids were even conceived. It was placed in graves alongside other essential items for the afterlife, underscoring its importance not just for the living, but for the deceased on their journey into eternity. This wasn't just some leftover makeup, it was considered a vital provision. The presence of khol pots, often beautifully crafted from alabaster, steatite, or even faience, in burial assemblages speaks volumes about its perceived necessity. These weren't cheap, disposable items, they were cherished possessions, meant to serve their owner even beyond the veil of life. The spiritual significance wasn't limited to Horus. Khol was also linked to Ra, the sun god. The dark outline around the eyes was thought to mimic the sun's disk, and by extension, to offer protection from the sun's intense glare, a very practical concern in the Egyptian climate, which we'll delve into more later. But beyond the practical, it was another way of aligning oneself with the powerful forces of the cosmos. Imagine the sun god himself, his eyes blazing, and then the humble Egyptian, reflecting that divine intensity in their own gaze. It's a powerful form of sympathetic magic. The very act of preparing and applying khol could be seen as a minor ritual. It wasn't just slapped on. There was a deliberateness to it, a focus that elevated it beyond the mundane. While the high priests in grand temples performed elaborate ceremonies with specific incantations and consecrated forms of khol, it's a matter of ongoing scholarly debate exactly how much of that formal religious liturgy trickled down into the daily, personal khol rituals of an average farmer or artisan. Was their application accompanied by specific silent prayers, or was the act itself, steeped in generations of tradition and belief, considered potent enough? We don't have little instruction pamphlets from the time, sadly, so the nuance of individual belief versus prescribed doctrine remains tantalizingly out of reach for the most common folk. There's a quirky, lesser-known aspect to the divine connection of eye makeup involving minor deities or spirits associated with sight and protection. For instance, the goddess Menkit, a frog-headed deity, was sometimes associated with childbirth and the protection of the newborn, whose eyes would often be among the first parts of their body to be adorned with khol. It's this intricate web of major gods, minor deities, and deeply ingrained folk beliefs that made khol such a ubiquitous and powerful substance. It wasn't just one thing, it was a layered symbol. The frog, a creature of the Nile's fertile waters, symbolized life and renewal, and so Menkit's subtle blessing, perhaps invoked through the application of khol, would have been a welcome addition to a family's spiritual defenses. Imagine a new mother, gently, carefully, applying a faint trace of khol to her infant's eyes, a silent plea to Menkit and Horus for a life of clarity, health, and protection. You watch as the applicator, now coated with a dark, slightly greasy powder, as the galena was often mixed with animal fat or oils to create a usable paste, is brought towards the eye. There's a stillness in the lamplight, a focused intensity. This isn't just about looking good for the neighbors, though social appearance certainly played its part. This is about arming oneself, spiritually and practically, for the coming night and the day ahead. The Egyptians believed that the gods appreciated beauty and order, ma'at, the fundamental concept of cosmic harmony. Presenting oneself in a well-kept, adorned manner was a way of upholding ma'at in one's own small sphere of influence. Thus, the cosmetic act becomes a religious duty, a contribution to the stability of the universe. Try telling that to your boss when you're late because your eyeliner took an extra 10 minutes. Sorry, I was upholding the cosmic order. The darkness of the Khol also served to accentuate the whites of the eyes, making the gaze appear more intense, more direct. In a society that valued direct communication and where the eyes were believed to convey so much, this was no small matter. It was a way of enhancing one's presence, of ensuring that one was truly seen and acknowledged. The divine aspect, therefore, wasn't just about abstract protection from unseen evils, it was also about empowering the individual in their daily interactions, imbuing their gaze with a hint of sacred authority, borrowed from the gods themselves. The subtle sheen of the galena, catching the light, would have made the eye seem more luminous, more alive, echoing the life-giving light of the sun or the guiding light of the stars. So, as you observe this nightly ritual unfolding in the quiet Egyptian home, remember that the small pot of Khol is a microcosm of a vast belief system. It contains not just ground minerals and oils, but also prayers, myths, and a deep-seated human desire for connection, protection, and a touch of the divine in everyday life. It's a testament to how the most ordinary of daily actions can be imbued with extraordinary meaning, transforming a simple cosmetic into a powerful spiritual tool. The very air around the person applying it seems to hum with this quiet significance, a subtle energy that the flickering lamplight only enhances, making the ordinary moment feel quite profound. Now, let's lean in a little closer, metaphorically of course, as we wouldn't want to disturb the delicate work about to unfold. The Khol that is eventually applied isn't something you'd just pick up ready-made from the local ancient equivalent of a convenience store, neatly packaged and standardized. Oh no. Its creation, especially in a household setting, is often a task of patience and precision, a small act of alchemy performed with humble tools. You're about to witness the mortar and pestle magic, the transformation of raw, earthy ingredients into that potent, protective cosmetic you heard about. Imagine a small, sturdy stone mortar, perhaps made of basalt or granite, cool to the touch, its interior worn smooth from countless sessions of grinding. Beside it rests a pestle of similar hardy stone. These aren't just any old rocks, they are chosen for their durability, their ability to withstand the repetitive stress of pulverizing minerals without chipping or adding unwanted grit to the precious final product. Into this mortar, the primary ingredient, the galena we mentioned, that lead sulfide mineral, would be placed. It might start as small, lustrous grey-black crystals or chunks, a substance wrested from the earth, often from mines in the eastern desert or imported from afar. There's something inherently grounding about this, taking a piece of the very fabric of the earth and preparing to transform it. The grinding begins. It's a rhythmic, repetitive motion. The scrape and crush of stone on stone, the pestle working against the galena in the mortar, is a sound that would have been intimately familiar in many ancient Egyptian homes. This isn't a quick, 5-minute job. To achieve the ultra-fine powder required for Khol, a powder that wouldn't scratch the delicate skin around the eyes, requires dedication. It's a slow, almost meditative process. You can picture the person, perhaps the woman of the house, her arm moving steadily, her focus entirely on the task. Each circular motion, each downward press, breaks the galena down further, reducing it from coarse granules to a finer, softer consistency. The air might carry a faint, metallic scent from the crushed ore. But galena, while the star of the show for black coal, known as mesdimet, wasn't always the only player. Sometimes other minerals were added for color or texture. For instance, malachite, a vibrant green copper carbonate ore, was often ground down to create green eye paint, called uju. The process would be similar, that patient pulverization. So, depending on the desired look or perhaps even the specific ritualistic intention, the base mineral might change. Historians have found evidence of a range of colors being used, though the black coal seems to have been the most enduring and widespread. Beyond the primary mineral, other ingredients were often incorporated. Soot, carefully collected from oil lamps, could be added to intensify the blackness, giving it a deeper, more velvety finish. It's a rather resourceful use of a byproduct, isn't it? Imagine someone carefully scraping the inside of a lamp, not to clean it, but to harvest this precious, darkening agent. There's a certain rustic charm to it, a far cry from complex chemical dyes. Animal fats, as we touched upon, or various plant oils, like castor oil or almond oil, would then be mixed with the fine powder. This wasn't just to create a paste that was easier to apply and adhered better to the skin, but also to add their own beneficial properties. Some oils were soothing, others might have had perceived protective qualities. The goal was to create a smooth, slightly greasy consistency, something that would glide onto the eyelid without clumping or flaking too easily. It's a well-known historical fact that many of the grinding palettes, especially from earlier periods like the predynastic and early dynastic, were often beautifully crafted, sometimes in the shape of animals like fish, turtles, or birds. These weren't just functional items, they were works of art in their own right, indicating the importance of the cosmetic process. While our modest household might be using a simpler stone mortar, the legacy of these elaborate palettes underscores the deep cultural significance of eye makeup. The care taken in crafting the tools reflects the care taken in the process itself. Now, here's a quirky, lesser-known tidbit. It's believed by some that the recipes for Khol could vary significantly, not just by region or availability of ingredients, but even from family to family, or for specific intended purposes. One family might add a pinch of a particular dried herb, ground to dust, believed to offer extra spiritual protection or perhaps a specific blessing. Another might have a secret way of processing the galena, perhaps roasting it slightly first, to alter its texture or perceived potency. These wouldn't be written down in cookbooks, of course, but passed orally from mother to daughter, a small piece of inherited wisdom. So, the Khol you might get in one household could be subtly different, carrying its own unique signature, its own little touch of domestic magic. The sifting would be another crucial step. After the initial grinding, the powder would likely be sifted through a fine piece of linen or a sieve made of woven reeds to remove any larger particles. This ensured that only the finest, most impalpable dust was used, making the final product soft and gentle on the eyes. Any remaining coarser bits would go back into the mortar for another round of persuasion from the pestle. It's this attention to detail, this refusal to cut corners, that elevates the process. You can't rush perfection, especially when perfection means not irritating your eyeballs, which, let's be honest, is a pretty good incentive for quality control. It is a matter of scholarly debate whether some of the more unusual additives found in analyses of ancient Khol samples were included purely for their physical properties, like color, texture, or preservation, or if they carried specific symbolic or medicinal intentions that are now obscure to us. For example, traces of certain plant extracts or resins might have been added. Were they there to make the Khol smell nicer, to act as a binder, or did that particular plant have an association with a protective deity or a healing property known to the Egyptians but lost to modern science? The lines are often wonderfully blurry, and it's this ambiguity that makes it so fascinating. We can analyze the chemical composition, but we can't always fully reconstruct the ancient mindset, the rich tapestry of belief that guided their choices. As the powder reaches the desired fineness, a palpable dust, almost like air, it would be carefully transferred to another vessel, perhaps a clean, shallow dish. Then, the oil or fat would be introduced, drop by drop, worked in with a small spatula or even a clean finger, until the perfect consistency was achieved, not too dry that it would crumble, not too greasy that it would smudge excessively. This blending process itself is an art. Too little binder, and it won't adhere. Too much, and it becomes a messy affair. Imagine the scent now, the earthy, slightly metallic aroma of the ground galena mingling with the nutty or fatty scent of the oil. It's a unique perfume, the smell of protection and identity being carefully crafted. This isn't just a task, it's a creation. The person making it is investing their time, their energy, and their intention into this small batch of Khol. And because it was often made in small quantities, it would be a relatively frequent ritual, this grinding and mixing, ensuring a fresh supply. There's something deeply satisfying about creating something you use daily, something that holds such personal and cultural weight, entirely from scratch. It's a world away from our mass-produced cosmetics, where the connection to the raw ingredients and the process of creation is often completely severed. Here, in this softly lit Egyptian home, that connection is tangible, immediate, and deeply personal, a quiet testament to the enduring human impulse to transform the raw materials of the earth into something beautiful, meaningful, and just a little bit magical. So, the precious Khol powder, now perfectly ground and perhaps already mixed into a smooth, alluring paste, awaits its destiny. But where does it reside before it graces the eyelids? And with what delicate instrument is it coaxed from its resting place and applied with such care? You now turn your gentle, drifting attention to the applicators and pots, the unsung heroes of the Khol ritual, each with its own quiet story to tell. These are not mere accessories, they are integral parts of the process, often objects of surprising beauty and ingenuity. Let's first consider the Khol pot, or tube. The most common design, a true mainstream historical fact you'll see in any museum exhibit on ancient Egypt, is the slender, tubular Khol pot, often made from materials like alabaster, steatite, soapstone, wood, ivory, or even brightly glazed faience. These tubes are typically small, easily held in the hand, with a narrow opening to minimize exposure of the precious contents to air and contaminants. Some are elegantly simple, their beauty lying in the natural grain of the wood or the subtle veining of the stone. Others are more ornate, perhaps inscribed with hieroglyphs offering prayers for protection, or decorated with geometric patterns or scenes from nature. Imagine running your fingers over a cool alabaster tube, smoothed by generations of use, its surface holding the faint, lingering scent of countless Khol applications. These tubes often came with a snugly fitting lid, crucial for keeping the Khol powder dry or the paste from drying out. The lid itself might be a simple disc or a more elaborate cap, sometimes attached to the applicator stick by a delicate bronze or linen thread chain, a clever bit of ancient design to prevent the tiny, essential pieces from getting lost. It's the kind of thoughtful detail that makes you appreciate the practical minds at work, even in the pursuit of beauty and ritual. Losing the lid would be a minor domestic tragedy, like losing the one good Tupperware lid that actually fits. Some things, it seems, are timeless struggles. You might also encounter double Khol tubes, two cylinders joined together, sometimes with separate lids or a shared one. These were incredibly practical, allowing a person to keep two different types of eye makeup, perhaps black Khol, mesdimet, in one tube and green uju, malachite-based, in the other, or maybe two different formulations of black Khol, one for daily wear and a special one for festivals. It's like having a little makeup palette, ancient Egyptian style, compact and efficient. Sometimes these double tubes were ingeniously carved from a single piece of wood or stone, showcasing considerable craftsmanship. The materials used for these pots were not chosen randomly. Stone, like alabaster or steatite, was cool to the touch and relatively non-porous, helping to preserve the Khol. Wood, while more susceptible to moisture, was easily carved and could be quite beautiful. Ivory, a luxury material, would have been reserved for the wealthier echelons of society, its creamy smoothness a delight to handle. And faience, that uniquely Egyptian ceramic made from powdered quartz, could be glazed in vibrant blues and greens, colors deeply symbolic of life, rebirth, and the Nile. The choice of material could reflect the owner's status, but even simpler clay pots, fired and perhaps modestly decorated, served their purpose dutifully in less affluent homes. Now, let's turn to the applicators, often called Khol sticks. These were typically slender rods, ranging from about 3 to 6 inches in length. The most common materials were wood, often smoothed and polished, bronze, ivory, or stone. Some were exceedingly simple, little more than a well-shaped twig. Others were more sophisticated. A common design featured a slightly thicker, rounded, or bulbous end for dipping into the Khol and applying it, while the other end might be pointed or flattened, perhaps for finer details or for mixing the Khol if it had settled. You can just imagine the delicate touch required, the stick held lightly between the fingers, poised for the steady sweep along the lash line. Bronze applicators are particularly interesting. The metal itself, an alloy of copper and tin, could sometimes react subtly with the Khol, and it's a matter of scholarly debate whether this interaction was understood or even intentionally utilized by the Egyptians. Did the trace copper oxides enhance the perceived medicinal properties of the lead-based Khol, or was bronze simply chosen for its durability and the ability to be cast into fine, smooth shapes? Some bronze applicators have developed a greenish patina over the millennia, a silent testament to their age and the chemical dialogues they've had with their contents and their environment. For a quirky, lesser-known tidbit, some coal pots and even applicators were imbued with extra apotropaic, evil-averting power through their very form. You might find coal pots cleverly shaped like the dwarf god Biz, his leering face meant to scare off malevolent spirits from both the user and the precious cosmetic itself. Or an applicator might have a tiny carving of a lotus flower, a symbol of creation and rebirth, or perhaps the ankh, the symbol of life, at its non-applying end. These weren't just decorative flourishes, they were an active layer of magical defense, turning everyday objects into miniature talismans. It's like having a tiny, divine bodyguard for your eyeliner. The craftsmanship could be exquisite. Even a seemingly simple wooden stick might be perfectly balanced, sanded to an almost silk-like smoothness. Ivory applicators could be carved with incredible delicacy, sometimes featuring a tiny hand at one end, as if the hand of a god itself was guiding the application. The wealthy, naturally, had access to the most luxurious versions. Gold or silver accents weren't unheard of, and some applicators were even made of semi-precious stones or, in later periods, glass. The care lavished on these tools underscores the importance of the ritual they served. These weren't disposable plastic wands, they were often lifelong companions, passed down through generations, each carrying the invisible imprint of its users. Consider the intimate connection between the user, the pot, and the applicator. The pot holds the essence, the applicator is the conduit, and the user is the canvas. There's a tactile relationship there, the feel of the cool stone pot, the smooth glide of the applicator, the slight resistance as it picks up the coal. These sensations, repeated daily, would become deeply ingrained, part of the rhythm of life. The tools become extensions of the hand, familiar and comforting. You might also see small stone pallets, reminiscent of the much larger ceremonial pallets from earlier history, but sized for personal use. On these, a little coal powder could be mixed with a drop of oil or water to create the desired consistency for application, especially if the coal was stored as a dry powder. The applicator stick itself could then be used for this mixing, its tip stirring the ingredients into a smooth paste before being carefully lifted to the eye. The shapes of the applicator tips were also varied and purposeful. Some were simply rounded for a bold, smooth line. Others were flattened or slightly spatulate, allowing for a broader sweep of color or for pressing the coal into the lash line. Some particularly fine applicators were incredibly slender, almost needle-like, perhaps used for creating very delicate lines or for applying coal to the inner rim of the eyelid, a practice known as waterlining today. Each shape served a function, refined over centuries of use. The residue of ancient coal has often been found still clinging to these pots and applicators when they're excavated from tombs, a poignant link to the last person who used them thousands of years ago. It's a reminder that these objects were not just static displays, they were active participants in the daily lives and eternal hopes of the ancient Egyptians. Holding one, or even just imagining holding one, you can almost feel the faint echo of that distant touch, a whisper from the past. The enduring presence of these tools, from the simplest clay pot and wooden stick to the most elaborate gilded creations, speaks to a universal human desire, to adorn, to protect, and to connect with something larger than oneself, all through the simple, yet profound, act of lining one's eyes. Now, with the coal prepared in its pot and the slender applicator poised, there's one more essential item that often played a crucial role in this nightly ritual, the mirror. You can't very well achieve that perfect, protective line around your eyes by guesswork alone, can you? Well, perhaps some highly skilled individuals could, but for most, a reflective surface was key. So, let your gaze drift towards the object that would allow our ancient Egyptian friend to see themselves, albeit in a way quite different from our modern, crystal-clear reflections. Ancient Egyptian mirrors were not made of glass as ours are today. Instead, they were typically crafted from highly polished metal, most commonly bronze, but sometimes copper or, for the very wealthy, even silver. Imagine a disc of bronze, painstakingly hammered and smoothed, then polished with fine abrasives, perhaps desert sand or a special polishing powder, until its surface gleamed with a soft, warm luster. This disc, often slightly convex to give a wider, though somewhat distorted, field of vision, would then be attached to a handle. And oh, the handles! These weren't just functional, they were often miniature works of art themselves. Handles could be made of wood, ivory, bone, faience, or even metal, and frequently took on symbolic shapes. Popular designs included a papyrus stalk, symbolizing youth and vitality, or the figure of a young woman, perhaps representing beauty and fertility. Sometimes, the handle was adorned with the head of Atha, the goddess of love, beauty, music, and motherhood, who had a strong association with mirrors. So, you picture the person in our quiet, lamp-lit room, holding this bronze mirror. The reflection it offered wouldn't be the sharp, photorealistic image you're accustomed to. Instead, it would be a softer, somewhat dimmer, and often warmer-toned reflection, imbued with the reddish or golden hue of the polished bronze. Details might be a little fuzzy, shadows deeper. Applying Khol with such a mirror would require a certain skill, a familiarity with how one's features appeared in that gentle, metallic sheen. It's a far cry from a brightly lit bathroom mirror. This is a more intimate, almost impressionistic, view of oneself. Perhaps that gentle fuzziness was a bit forgiving, a kind of ancient soft focus filter. We can only speculate. It's a mainstream historical fact that mirrors were common grave goods, especially in the burials of women, though men used them too. This tells us they were considered important personal possessions, items valuable enough to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. Their inclusion wasn't just for vanity, mirrors held deep symbolic meaning. The Egyptian word for mirror, Anki-en-Maher, can be translated as seeing face or related to the word Ankh, meaning life or to live. So, the mirror was not just a tool for seeing one's reflection, but was intrinsically linked to life, vitality, and perception. The reflective surface of the mirror was also strongly associated with the sun and, by extension, with sun deities like Ra and Atha. Atha, in particular, was often called the Lady of the Mirror or the Golden One, and mirrors were sacred to her. The gleaming disk of the mirror could be seen as a miniature sun, a source of light and life. Holding it, one was, in a way, holding a piece of divine radiance. This connection imbued the act of looking into a mirror with a certain sacredness. It wasn't just self-admiration, it was a moment of connection with divine principles of light, life, and beauty. You weren't just checking if your Khol was straight, you were perhaps also briefly communing with the golden light of Atha. Now, for a quirky, lesser-known tidbit, some texts and depictions suggest that mirrors could also be used in divination or other magical practices. The reflective surface, providing a glimpse into a slightly altered reality, was seen as a potential portal or a tool for scrying, for seeing things not visible to the naked eye, perhaps even for communicating with the deceased or with deities. It's a fascinating thought that the same object used for the daily ritual of applying Khol could also be a tool for peering into the unknown. The polished surface, holding a shadowy, flickering image in the lamplight, certainly lends itself to an air of mystery. It's like your compact mirror having a secret side hustle in fortune-telling. The act of applying Khol using such a mirror becomes a focused, almost ritualistic moment of self-awareness. You see the individual gazing intently at their reflection, not with the quick, critical glance we might give ourselves today, but with a slower, more deliberate regard. The applicator moves carefully, tracing the lines that are both beautiful and protective. The soft glow of the lamplight would dance on the polished bronze, the reflection shifting with every slight movement. It's a quiet dialogue between the self and the image, between the physical act of adornment and its deeper spiritual significance. It's a matter of scholarly debate whether the inherent softness or slight distortion of the bronze mirror's reflection was perceived as a flaw or perhaps even, unintentionally or intentionally, as a feature. Did it encourage a more idealized or generalized self-image, focusing less on minute imperfections and more on the overall form and the symbolic power of the adorned eyes? Or was it simply the best reflective technology they had, and they worked with its limitations? We can't know for sure, but it's interesting to consider how the nature of one's reflection might shape one's self-perception over time. If your reflection is always a little gentle, a little forgiving, perhaps you become a little gentler with yourself. The mirror, in this context, is more than just a tool for accuracy. It's a participant in the ritual. As the Khol is applied, the eyes in the reflection transform, becoming more defined, more intense, framed by the sacred dark lines. This transformation, witnessed in the mirror's depths, reaffirms the protective and empowering qualities of the Khol. It's a moment of seeing oneself not just as one is, but as one intends to be, protected, beautified, and connected to the divine order. Imagine the care taken with these mirrors. They would have been kept polished, perhaps wrapped in linen when not in use to prevent scratches and tarnishing. A tarnished mirror wouldn't just be less effective, it might also be seen as diminishing its symbolic power, its connection to light and life. So, the maintenance of the mirror itself could have been a small ritual, a rubbing away of the accumulated dimness to restore its bright, life-affirming gleam. The handles, too, as we mentioned, added another layer of meaning. If your mirror handle was shaped like a papyrus stalk, it was a constant tactile reminder of growth, renewal, and the life-giving Nile. If it depicted Atha, her presence was literally in your hand, her divine influence perhaps felt more keenly during this intimate ritual of self-adornment. These weren't just pretty decorations, they were active symbolic elements, reinforcing the mirror's sacred associations. So, as the final touches are made to the Khol, guided by the soft sheen of the bronze mirror, the ritual is nearing its completion. The eyes, now framed and protected, gaze back from the metallic surface. It's a moment of quiet affirmation, a personal rite that has connected the individual to their gods, their culture, and their own deepest sense of self. The mirror, in this ancient Egyptian home, is not an instrument of vanity alone, but a window to a more luminous, magically charged version of oneself, reflecting not just a face, but a soul prepared to meet the night, and the dawn that will follow. The lines of Khol are now perfectly drawn, perhaps a bold, dark almond shape encircling each eye, or a more subtle enhancement along the upper and lower lash lines. The reflection in the polished bronze mirror affirms the transformation. But this nightly, and often daily, ritual was about so much more than just achieving a certain look or even fulfilling a spiritual observance. You now consider the intensely practical, down-to-earth reasons why ancient Egyptians so diligently applied this dark pigment. Khol was a formidable shield, a multipurpose barrier against some of the everyday environmental assaults in the Nile Valley. First and foremost, imagine the Egyptian sun. We're not talking about a gentle, intermittently cloudy European summer day. This is the North African sun, a relentless, blazing orb that dominates the sky for much of the year, reflecting fiercely off the desert sands and the shimmering surface of the Nile. The glare could be, and was, intense. The dark Khol, by absorbing some of this excess light and reducing the amount that entered the eye, acted much like modern sunglasses do, or perhaps more accurately, like the eye black smeared beneath the eyes of athletes today. It helped to cut down on the blinding glare, making it easier to see and more comfortable to be outdoors. For a population that spent a great deal of time working outside, farmers in the fields, fishermen on the river, builders constructing monumental edifices, this was a significant benefit. It wasn't just about comfort, it was about preserving one's ability to function effectively under often harsh visual conditions. Squinting all day leads to headaches and, I imagine, a rather grumpy disposition. Khol offered a touch of relief. Then there were the flies. Oh, the flies. In a warm climate, near a major river, with agriculture and animal husbandry all around, flies and other small, annoying insects would have been a constant presence, especially during certain seasons. These weren't just a minor nuisance, they were carriers of disease. One of the most prevalent ailments in ancient Egypt, as evidenced by medical papyri and studies of human remains, was trachoma, a bacterial eye infection that, if left untreated, can lead to blindness. This is a well-established historical fact. Eye diseases were rampant. The Egyptians were acutely aware of the problems these insects caused, and Khol was one of their primary lines of defense. It was believed that the dark pigment, and perhaps the ingredients mixed within it, acted as a repellent. The slightly greasy base of the Khol paste might have also made it difficult for flies to land near the delicate tissues of the eye. If you've ever tried to swat a fly in a humid climate, you know they're persistent. Anything that discouraged them from buzzing around your eyeballs would have been a welcome invention. Beyond flies, there was the ever-present dust and sand of the desert. Even within the fertile Nile Valley, winds could whip up fine particles, carrying them into homes and, inevitably, towards people's eyes. The Khol, particularly the paste-like formulations, may have helped to trap some of these irritants before they could cause inflammation or abrasion. Think of it as a very rudimentary form of protective goggles, a sticky perimeter guard for your precious peepers. While perhaps not a perfect solution, every little bit of protection would have counted in an environment where eye irritation could quickly escalate into more serious problems. And, of course, we return to the ever-present concern of ill wishes, or the evil eye. This belief, prevalent in many cultures throughout history and even today, posits that a malevolent glare from an envious or hostile person could cause misfortune, illness, or general bad luck. The eyes, being the windows to the soul, were considered particularly vulnerable entry points for such negative energies. The application of Khol was a powerful apotropaic measure, a way to ward off this unseen threat. The dark, defined outline was thought to strengthen the eye, to make it more formidable and less susceptible to penetration by harmful influences. It was like drawing a magical circle of protection directly onto your body. The direct, perhaps intensified gaze created by the Khol might also have been seen as a way to deflect such ill intentions, meeting a potentially hostile look with a strong, protected one. Now for a quirky, lesser-known tidbit related to this protective aspect. While the physical barrier of Khol against insects is understandable, there were likely also beliefs that the Khol itself, due to its ingredients or sacred associations, like with Horus, possessed an inherent magical ability to repel pests beyond its mere physical presence. Perhaps the faint scent of the galena or specific herbal additives was thought to be offensive to troublesome spirits that might manifest as flies, or that the divine blessing imbued in the Khol created an invisible shield. It wasn't just a fly swat, it was spiritual pest control. Some incantations for eye treatments protection specifically mention warding off disease-carrying demons, and the Khol would have been seen as part of this magical arsenal. The actual efficacy of Khol as a truly effective insect repellent or a guaranteed preventative against eye infections is, naturally, a subject of some scholarly debate when measured against modern scientific standards. While certain compounds in lead-based Khol might have had some mild antiseptic properties, which we'll touch upon later, it's unlikely they could single-handedly conquer rampant bacterial infections in a world without antibiotics. However, the psychological benefit, the strong belief in its protective power, was undoubtedly immense. If you believe you are shielded, you move through the world with greater confidence. And certainly, reducing sun glare and providing even a minimal barrier against dust and flies would have offered tangible relief and some degree of practical protection, regardless of its ultimate germ-fighting capabilities. Imagine an ancient Egyptian mother carefully applying Khol to her child's eyes. She's not just making her child look like the statues of the gods, she's actively trying to protect them from the harshness of the sun, the irritation of flies that could bring sickness, and the unseen dangers of malevolent forces. It's an act of care, a practical and spiritual shielding woven into one simple gesture. The child, in turn, learns that this dark outline is a source of comfort and safety, a familiar part of daily life that keeps discomfort and perhaps even danger at bay. The very ingredients, sourced from the earth and sometimes carrying divine associations, would have contributed to this sense of a holistic shield. The galena, from deep within the desert, carried the strength of the earth. The oils or fat soothed the skin. Any herbal additives brought their own unique properties. Together, they formed a complex barrier, addressing threats on multiple levels, the physical, the environmental, and the supernatural. So, as you picture our friend in their lamplit room, their eyes now defined and shielded by the freshly applied Khol, you understand that this isn't just a cosmetic enhancement for the evening. It's a preparation for the ongoing engagement with the world. When they step out into the sun the next morning, their eyes will be better equipped to handle the glare. As they go about their day, the flies might be a little less bothersome. And in their interactions, they carry an ancient form of spiritual armor. The Khol is a silent guardian, a testament to ancient ingenuity in adapting to a challenging, yet beautiful, environment. It's a multi-layered defense system, elegantly simple in its application, yet profound in its perceived effects. Having acknowledged Khol's role as a valiant shield against the sun, the pesky flies, and the ever-dreaded evil eye, you now find yourself peering even deeper into that little pot, considering another of its widely proclaimed virtues, its use as ancient eye medicine. It's a fascinating, and somewhat controversial, aspect of Khol, particularly when we view it through our modern understanding of chemistry and health. The line between cosmetic, protective charm, and actual therapeutic agent was, for the ancient Egyptians, wonderfully and perhaps sometimes perilously, blurred. The primary ingredient in black coal, as we've established, was galena, which is lead sulfide. Now, in the 21st century, the mere mention of lead in anything intended for use on the body, especially near the eyes, quite rightly sets off alarm bells. We are acutely aware of lead's toxicity and the serious health problems it can cause. But you have to transport yourself back into a mindset where the understanding of toxicology was vastly different. The ancient Egyptians wouldn't have conducted double-blind studies or worried about parts per million concentrations. They operated on observation, tradition, and a belief system that attributed certain properties to natural substances. For them, galena wasn't toxic lead compound, it was mesdemet, a gift from the earth, sanctioned by tradition and perhaps even by the gods, with perceived benefits that far outweighed any unseen drawbacks. This is where things get particularly intriguing. While the long-term, cumulative effects of lead exposure would have undoubtedly occurred, some modern scientific research has proposed a rather surprising theory regarding the short-term use of these lead-based cosmetics. It's been suggested that certain lead compounds, in very low concentrations, when they come into contact with the eye and skin, can stimulate human cells to produce more nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a fascinating little molecule that, among other things, can help boost the immune system's response to infection by activating macrophages, the body's cellular defenders. So, the theory goes, these lead-based coals might have, paradoxically, helped to prevent or combat some bacterial eye infections by essentially kicking the local immune response into a higher gear. It's a complex idea, the body fighting fire with, well, a tiny bit of something that could later be problematic, but in the immediate skirmish, might offer an edge. It's like your body's bouncers getting an unexpected espresso shot right when trouble walks in. It's a mainstream historical fact that ancient Egyptian medical texts, such as the famous Ebers Papyrus, which dates back to around 1550 BCE, contain numerous remedies and prescriptions for various ailments, including a significant number of treatments for eye problems. Given the prevalence of eye diseases like trachoma, conjunctivitis, what they might have called inflammation of the eyes, and cataracts, this focus is hardly surprising. Many of these ancient prescriptions list ingredients like honey, known for its antimicrobial properties, animal fats, various herbs, and, importantly, mineral components that are consistent with the ingredients of coal, such as galena or malachite. Coal, or substances very much like it, weren't just for looking good, they were actively prescribed by ancient physicians, or SWNW, pronounced Sunu, for their perceived healing qualities. This brings us to a quirky, lesser-known tidbit. It's quite possible that specific recipes for medicinal coal existed, tailored for particular eye complaints. Just as a physician today might prescribe different antibiotics for different infections, an ancient Egyptian SWNW might have compounded a specific type of coal with particular additives if you came to them with, say, running eyes versus cloudiness of vision. Perhaps one recipe included more frankincense, known for its anti-inflammatory properties, while another featured a different herb believed to soothe irritation or dispel demons of blindness. The color itself might have played a role in these medicinal distinctions. Green eye paint, uju, from malachite, was sometimes associated with healing and new growth, and so might have been preferred for certain conditions, while the black mesdemet was perhaps seen as more generally protective or potent against infections. These variations would have been part of the specialized knowledge of the healers and perhaps even some households. Of course, the actual extent of the direct medical benefit of these coal-based treatments, especially those relying heavily on lead, is a subject of ongoing scholarly debate. Was the perceived improvement due to the lead compound stimulating nitric oxide, as the modern theory suggests? Was it the antimicrobial properties of other ingredients like honey or certain herbs that were often mixed in? Or was there a significant placebo effect at play, where the ritual of application by a respected healer, combined with the patient's strong belief in the remedy's power, led to a perceived or even actual improvement? It's likely a combination of factors. It's hard to discount the power of belief, especially when treatment is intertwined with religious and magical incantations, as was often the case in ancient Egyptian medicine. Consider also the soothing physical sensation. A cool, smooth paste applied around irritated, sun-baked eyes would have felt good, regardless of its deeper chemical interactions. The oils and fats in the coal would have provided a moisturizing barrier, which could alleviate dryness and protect the delicate skin. So, Even if the cure wasn't always as potent as believed, the palliative effect, the relief of symptoms, would have been very real and highly valued. If your eyes feel better after applying something, you're naturally going to believe it's good medicine. The Egyptians were also keen observers of nature, and it's plausible they noted that certain substances seemed to help with certain conditions. If applying a galena-based paste seemed to correlate with a reduction in eye inflammation for some individuals, that empirical observation, passed down through generations, would solidify its place in their pharmacopoeia, even without understanding the precise biochemical mechanisms or the long-term risks. They were results-oriented, within the framework of their understanding. So, when you see that dark rim around the ancient Egyptians' eyes, you're looking at something that they considered not just a beautifier or a spiritual shield, but also a form of preventative medicine and active treatment. It's a testament to their ingenuity and their determined efforts to combat the ailments that plagued them, using the resources their environment provided. They were, in essence, some of the earliest experimenters in topical treatments, blending mineralogy, botany, and a healthy dose of magical belief into their healthcare practices. The little Khol pot holds not just pigment, but generations of medical experimentation, a silent witness to the ancient human quest for health and well-being, even if some of their favorite ingredients make us modern folk raise a very cautious eyebrow. It's a good reminder that what is considered medicinal can dramatically change with time and knowledge. Having explored the practical protections and the intriguing, if somewhat debatable, medicinal virtues of Khol, you now broaden your gaze from the individual in this lamplit room to the wider society of ancient Egypt. What becomes strikingly clear is that this practice of adorning the eyes with dark pigment was not the exclusive domain of a select few, nor was it confined by gender or age. Khol, in its various forms, was a truly universal adornment, a common thread running through the diverse tapestry of Egyptian life, from the highest echelons of power to the humblest village dwellings. Imagine looking at the vast array of ancient Egyptian art, the serene statues, the vibrant tomb paintings, the intricate reliefs that have survived millennia. One of the most consistent features you'll observe, a mainstream historical fact, is the depiction of figures with their eyes prominently outlined in black or sometimes green. This isn't just artistic convention, it reflects a widespread societal practice. Men, women, and children, from pharaohs and queens in their opulent regalia to farmers, artisans, and dancers, are all consistently portrayed with these distinctive, Khol-enhanced eyes. It speaks volumes about how deeply ingrained this custom was, an accepted and expected part of one's appearance. Let's consider men, for instance. In many cultures, elaborate makeup is often seen as predominantly female. But in ancient Egypt, men regularly used Khol. This wasn't seen as effeminate or frivolous, rather, it was associated with virility, strength, and divine protection. Think of the powerful gaze of a pharaoh, his eyes made even more intense and commanding by the dark lines of Khol, connecting him to the hawk-eyed god Horus. Warriors and hunters might have worn it not only for sun glare reduction but also to create a fiercer, more intimidating appearance. Beyond these roles, ordinary men, scribes, craftsmen, laborious, also applied Khol for the same reasons as everyone else: protection from the elements, from disease-carrying flies, from ill wishes, and for its perceived health benefits. It was simply a part of daily grooming and well-being, like washing or combing one's hair. A well-groomed man was a respectable man, and Khol was part of that equation. Then, of course, there were the women. For Egyptian women of all social strata, Khol was an indispensable beauty aid, enhancing the size and allure of their eyes, which were considered a focal point of beauty. The elongated, almond shape created by the Khol was highly prized. But again, it was far more than just vanity. For women, it was also a mark of piety, connecting them to goddesses like Atha, the embodiment of beauty, love, and feminine power. It was a symbol of their status and self-respect. And, just like for men and children, it served those crucial protective functions against the sun, against infection, and against negative spiritual influences. Whether a queen in her palace meticulously applying the finest quality galena from an ivory pot, or a farmer's wife using a simpler formulation from a clay container, the underlying motivations and the essential act remained remarkably consistent. And what about the children? From a very young age, Egyptian children, both boys and girls, had Khol applied to their eyes. This practice was primarily driven by the desire to protect these vulnerable young members of society. Infants and toddlers, with their still developing immune systems and their tendency to rub their eyes, would have been particularly susceptible to eye infections and the irritation caused by flies and dust. Khol was seen as a vital prophylactic, a gentle shield. There's something incredibly tender in the image of a mother carefully lining her baby's eyes, a silent prayer for health and safety in every stroke. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is the archaeological evidence of Khol found on child mummies, sometimes even infants, confirming that this practice began literally from the cradle and was intended to extend into the afterlife. It underscores the profound belief in its continuous protective power. While the practice was universal, the quality of the Khol and the containers and applicators used would naturally vary according to social status and wealth. The elite could afford Khol made from the purest galena, perhaps with expensive imported oils or rare fragrant resins mixed in. Their Khol pots might be crafted from alabaster, ivory, or even faience decorated with gold. Common folk, on the other hand, might use Khol of a slightly lesser grade, perhaps with more soot or other readily available extenders, stored in simple pottery or wooden containers. Yet, the fundamental act of outlining the eyes, and the core beliefs underpinning it, transcended these material differences. The desire for beauty, health, and divine protection was a shared human experience across the social spectrum. It's a matter of scholarly debate whether the intensity or specific style of Khol application varied significantly and consistently by social class, beyond just the quality of the materials. Did commoners wear a thinner, more practical line while the wealthy indulged in more elaborate, dramatic styles? Art depictions sometimes hint at variations, thicker lines for royalty, perhaps more stylized applications for certain ceremonial roles. However, distinguishing artistic convention from everyday reality, especially for the non-elite whose lives are less lavishly documented, can be challenging. It's probable that personal preference and skill also played a large part, just as they do today. Some folks are just better at winged liner, regardless of their tax bracket. The universality of Khol also speaks to a certain societal cohesion around shared beliefs and customs. When everyone, from the top of the social ladder to the bottom, engages in the same daily ritual, it reinforces a collective identity, a sense of belonging to the same cultural and spiritual framework. The Khol-lined eye became an instantly recognizable symbol of Egyptianness, both to themselves and perhaps to neighboring cultures. Imagine walking through an ancient Egyptian town or village. The eyes of the people you meet, the merchant selling his wares, the woman grinding grain, the children playing by the riverbank, the priest heading towards the local temple, would all likely bear those familiar dark markings. It would be as commonplace as seeing people wearing shoes or hats in many modern societies. This widespread adoption is a powerful testament to Khol's perceived efficacy and its deep integration into the cultural psyche. It wasn't a trend that came and went, it was a practice that endured for millennia, adapting and persisting through different dynasties and historical periods. So, when you think of Khol, don't just picture a queen like Nefertiti with her iconic, perfectly defined eyes. Picture also the tired farmer, his eyes still shielded by Khol as he returns from the fields at dusk. Picture the playful child, whose Khol might be a little smudged from an afternoon of games. Picture the elderly storyteller, their Khol-lined eyes reflecting the wisdom of years. It was truly an adornment for all, a democratic cosmetic in a hierarchical society, binding them together in a shared vision of beauty, health, and spiritual fortitude. While Khol was indeed a remarkably democratic cosmetic, gracing the eyes of nearly everyone in ancient Egypt, you can imagine that for those at the very pinnacle of society, the pharaohs, their royal families, and the high priests and priestesses serving in the great temples, the application and significance of Khol ascended to an even more rarefied and sacred level. If the commoner's Khol was a daily shield and a touch of beauty, the pharaoh's was a statement of divine power, an instrument of statecraft, and a conduit to the gods themselves. These were the pharaoh's sacred lines, imbued with layers of meaning and crafted with unparalleled care. Let's first consider the materials. While a farmer might use galena of decent quality, the pharaoh and the temple deities would have access to the absolute finest. This meant Khol made from the purest, most lustrous galena, meticulously ground to an almost ethereal fineness. The oils mixed with it wouldn't just be common castor or sesame oil, they might be exotic, perfumed oils like moringa oil, or perhaps infused with precious resins like frankincense and myrrh, not just for their fragrance but for their sacred associations and perceived purifying properties. There's even speculation, though it leans more towards the symbolic than the everyday, that for certain supremely important occasions, trace amounts of powdered semi-precious stones like lapis lazuli, for its celestial blue, or even gold dust might have been incorporated into ceremonial cosmetics, lending a literal sparkle to the divine gaze. Imagine Khol that not only protected but also shimmered with the wealth and sacred power of the kingdom. And the containers. The simple clay or wooden pots of the common folk give way here to masterpieces of artistry and opulence. A well-known historical fact is the discovery of breathtakingly beautiful cosmetic containers in the tomb of Tutankhamun. These weren't just functional, they were treasures. Khol pots crafted from solid gold, inlaid with vibrant carnelian, turquoise, and lapis lazuli, shaped like ankhs or other potent symbols. Applicators of ivory or gold, sometimes with handles depicting deities or protective symbols, all exquisitely worked. Holding such an object would be a constant reminder of one's elevated status and divine connection. These weren't just make-up kits, they were sacred regalia. The act of applying Khol to the pharaoh might also have been more ritualized. While we don't have minute-by-minute accounts, it's plausible that specific attendants, perhaps even priests or individuals trained in cosmetic arts and their ritual significance, were responsible for this task. The application would not be a rushed affair but a deliberate, careful process, possibly accompanied by recitations or quiet invocations to ensure the Khol was not just physically applied but also magically activated or charged with hika, the Egyptian concept of magic or authoritative utterance. The pharaoh was, after all, the intermediary between the gods and mortals, a living Horus. His appearance was a matter of cosmic importance, reinforcing Ma'at, order and justice, in the land. His perfectly lined eyes, echoing the Wadjet eye, would project power, wisdom, and divine authority. The styles of application for royalty and in divine depictions could also be more elaborate. While the basic almond shape was common, you sometimes see in art particularly elongated lines, more dramatic sweeps, or specific embellishments that might have been reserved for the highest status or for representing deities. The famous bust of Nefertiti, with her elegantly extended Khol lines, epitomizes this regal style. Whether these elaborate styles were daily wear even for queens, or reserved for specific ceremonies and official appearances, is a matter of some scholarly debate. It's likely a mix, a more toned-down version for everyday royal life, and the full, spectacular works for when they were truly on divine display. It's like having your everyday royal eyeliner and you're addressing the adoring public from a golden chariot eyeliner. A fascinating and quirky tidbit is the idea that the pharaoh's Khol might have had unique, secret ingredients or preparation methods known only to a select few within the palace or temple workshops. These royal recipes could have included specific herbs believed to enhance perception, grant prophetic vision, or offer unparalleled spiritual protection, substances too rare or too sacred for common use. The knowledge of these formulations would be a closely guarded secret, part of the mystique and power associated with the ruler. The pharaoh didn't just wear Khol, he wore pharaoh's Khol, a substance as unique as his divine mandate. Furthermore, Khol played a vital role in temple rituals, specifically in the daily cult statues of the gods. Each morning, priests would perform the opening of the mouth ceremony for the cult image of the deity. This elaborate ritual involved purifying the statue, clothing it in fresh linens, offering it food and incense, and, crucially, anointing its face and applying eye paint, often both green and black Khol. This act was believed to animate the statue, allowing the god or goddess to see out of it, to receive the offerings, and to extend their divine influence into the world. So, the application of Khol was literally part of what made the god present in their temple. The priests performing this act would themselves be meticulously adorned with Khol, their own eyes prepared to meet the gaze of the divine. The symbolism of the Eye of Horus was, of course, paramount in these elite contexts. The pharaoh, as the living embodiment of Horus, or at least his earthly representative, carried this symbolism with profound weight. Every time Khol was applied to his eyes, it was a reaffirmation of his legitimacy, his power, his wholeness, and his connection to the triumph of order over chaos, just as Horus triumphed over Set. The two lines of Khol were not just lines, they were potent hieroglyphs drawn upon the living flesh of the king. Even the choice between black, Mesdemet, and green, uju, eye paint could take on deeper significance in royal and divine contexts. Green, associated with Osiris, god of the underworld and rebirth, and with the fertile growth of the Nile, might be used in rituals related to renewal, resurrection, or agricultural abundance. Black, linked to the fertile soil of Kemet, the darkness of the Duat, underworld, and the protective night, might be used for general protection, power, and journeys into the afterlife. The pharaoh, navigating both the earthly and spiritual realms, might have employed both at different times or for different symbolic purposes. Therefore, the pharaoh's sacred lines were far more than a cosmetic choice. They were an integral part of the machinery of kingship and divine worship. The quality of the materials reflected the wealth and glory of Egypt. The craftsmanship of the tools mirrored the perfection of the cosmic order the pharaoh upheld. The act of application was a sacred rite, reinforcing the pharaoh's unique status and his vital role in maintaining the balance between the human and divine worlds. When you see those serene, powerfully outlined eyes on a colossal statue of Ramesses II or the golden mask of Tutankhamun, you're seeing the culmination of this tradition, Khol used not just to see, but to be seen as divine, powerful, and eternal. From the divine gaze of the living pharaoh and the animated eyes of temple statues, your attention now drifts towards an even more enduring concern for the ancient Egyptians, the afterlife. If Khol was essential for navigating the challenges and upholding the beauty of earthly existence, it was deemed absolutely indispensable for the long, complex, and often perilous journey into eternity. This was beauty for eternity, where the sacred lines of Khol played a crucial role in preparing the deceased, ensuring their safe passage and blessed existence in the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. Imagine the scene, not in a lamplit home this time, but within the hushed, incense-filled atmosphere of an embalmer's workshop or a tomb chapel. The body of the deceased, having undergone the lengthy process of mummification to preserve it for eternity, is now being prepared for its final adornment. Just as Khol was applied daily in life, it was applied with even greater solemnity and purpose in death. This wasn't merely about looking presentable for Osiris, though that was certainly part of it. The application of Khol to the eyes of the mummy was a deeply ritualistic act, packed with profound spiritual significance. One of the primary reasons for this practice was the restoration and enhancement of sight in the afterlife. The ancient Egyptians believed that the deceased needed to see clearly to navigate the treacherous paths of the Duat, to read the sacred texts like the Book of the Dead that would guide them, to recognize friendly deities, and to identify and avoid hostile demons and obstacles. The eyes of the mummy, often inlaid with stone or obsidian to mimic life, were ritually opened in the opening of the mouth ceremony, a crucial rite that aimed to reanimate all the senses of the deceased. Applying Khol was an integral part of this, magically ensuring that the spiritual eyes of the Ka, life force, and Ba, soul personality, would function perfectly in the next world. Without sight, the deceased would be lost, stumbling blindly through an eternity of darkness and confusion, a terrifying prospect. Khol was the magical key to illuminated passage. Furthermore, adorning the deceased with Khol helped them to identify with, and be accepted by, the gods, particularly Osiris, the king of the underworld. Osiris himself was consistently depicted with Khol-lined eyes, a mark of his divine authority and his triumph over death. By emulating this divine appearance, the deceased hoped to be welcomed by Osiris and to share in his resurrection. It was a way of saying, "I am one of you, I have lived in accordance with Ma'at and am worthy of eternal life among the blessed." The Khol lines transformed the deceased from a mere mortal spirit into an ark, an effective, glorified spirit, ready to take their place in the divine hierarchy. It was like wearing the correct, divinely sanctioned uniform for entry into the celestial realms. The apotropaic, or protective, qualities of Khol, so valued in life, were considered even more vital in the afterlife. The Duat was envisioned as a place filled with trials, fiery lakes, monstrous serpents, and malevolent gatekeepers who would challenge the deceased at every turn. The Eye of Horus, invoked by the Khol markings, was the ultimate symbol of protection, healing, and wholeness. These sacred lines were believed to act as a powerful shield, warding off demons, deflecting harmful magic, and ensuring the deceased could pass safely through the various gates and judgment halls. It was spiritual armor for the soul's most critical battle. A well-established historical fact is the ubiquitous presence of Khol pots, applicators, and cosmetic palettes in tombs across all social strata, from the predynastic period, long before the pharaohs as we know them, right through to the Roman era. This wasn't limited to the rich and powerful, even relatively modest burials often contained at least a simple coal pot and applicator. This demonstrates the universal belief in the necessity of these items for the afterlife. The deceased would need to continue their beauty and protective rituals in the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. It's quite a comforting thought, really, ensuring you have your essential toiletries packed for eternity. No one wants to face eternity with smudged eyeliner, especially if you have to pass through a series of divine judgments. Now for a quirky, lesser-known tidbit. While the Book of the Dead and other funerary texts contain numerous spells for protection, guidance, and the granting of senses in the afterlife, some of these spells specifically allude to the importance of sight and the integrity of the eyes. For instance, spell 167 includes a prayer for the deceased's eyes to be given to them in the underworld. The physical application of Khol, coupled with the recitation of such spells, would have been seen as a potent combination, ensuring the magical efficacy of the words. It's also been speculated by some scholars whether a special funerary Khol might have been prepared, perhaps with additional sacred ingredients or specific consecrations, intended solely for the deceased, though concrete evidence for distinct recipes is elusive. The question of whether the Khol applied to mummies was always real, functional Khol prepared with galena and oils, or sometimes a purely symbolic representation using inert pigments, is a matter of some scholarly discussion. In many cases, analysis has shown actual lead-based Khol. However, it's conceivable that in some instances, or for certain parts of the funerary ritual, a symbolic application with a black pigment might have sufficed, especially if the focus was purely on the visual representation for the gods. The intent, however, remained the same, to equip the deceased with perfect, divinely protected vision. Imagine the embalmers or priests, their hands steady, as they carefully drew those familiar lines around the closed or inlaid eyes of the mummy. It was a final act of care, a last bestowal of beauty and protection before the tomb was sealed. The Khol pots and applicators placed within the tomb were not just mementos, they were functional tools for an ongoing existence. The deceased was expected to wake up in the afterlife and continue their daily routines, including their cosmetic rituals. The lines of Khol on the mummy's face were thus both a final touch of earthly preparation and the first step in their eternal toilet. The style of application in funerary contexts often mirrored the idealized depictions in art, emphasizing the perfect, youthful, and divine appearance desired for the afterlife. The lines would be clear, precise, and often imbued with the iconic shape of the wadjet eye. This wasn't about transient fashion, it was about achieving an eternal, sacred aesthetic, one that signaled the deceased's transformation into a blessed spirit. So, as the mummy lay in its sarcophagus, adorned and equipped, the Khol on its eyes was a silent testament to a profound belief system. It represented the Egyptian conviction that life, in a transformed state, continued after death, and that the cares and preparations of this world had their counterparts in the next. Those dark, sacred lines were a passport to vision in the underworld, a shield against its dangers, and a mark of kinship with the gods, ensuring that the deceased would not just endure eternity, but would do so beautifully and safely. Having journeyed with the ancient Egyptians into the very afterlife, ensuring their eternal vision with sacred Khol, let's gently reel ourselves back to the realm of the living, to the practicalities of their sun-drenched daily existence. You've seen how Khol was made, applied, and revered. But how did they keep this precious cosmetic safe and usable? After all that careful grinding and mixing, you wouldn't want your hard-won eyeliner paste drying into an unusable rock or, worse, becoming a tiny petri dish for unwelcome microscopic guests. So, you now ponder the methods, both ingenious and perhaps serendipitous, that ancient Egyptians used to preserve their Khol pots and their valuable contents. The challenges were very real. If the Khol was stored as a dry powder, moisture was the enemy, potentially causing clumping or encouraging microbial growth. If it was mixed into a paste with oils or fats, it faced the threat of drying out, becoming rancid, or separating over time, especially in the Egyptian heat. And in an environment with ubiquitous dust and insects, preventing contamination was a constant concern. They didn't have the benefit of modern preservatives or airtight sterile packaging, so their solutions would have been rooted in careful observation, clever design, and the inherent properties of their chosen ingredients. First, let's revisit those coal containers we discussed earlier. The design of coal pots and tubes wasn't just about aesthetics or ease of use, it was also intrinsically linked to preservation. The common tubular coal pot, often with its very narrow opening and a tightly fitting lid, was a marvel of practical design. This minimized the surface area of the coal exposed to air, thus reducing moisture loss if it was a paste, or moisture ingress if it was a powder. The snug lid, sometimes even with a little plug that extended down into the neck of the tube, would have further sealed out air, dust, and those ever-curious insects. It's a mainstream historical fact that the careful construction of these containers, often from non-porous materials like stone, alabaster, steatite, or glazed faience, played a significant role in maintaining the coal's integrity. These materials wouldn't react with the contents and provided a good barrier against external elements. Then there are the ingredients themselves. The ancient Egyptians, through centuries of trial and error, likely discovered that certain substances had inherent preservative qualities. The lead compounds in mesdemet, black coal, such as galena, lead sulfide, and other lead minerals like laurionite and phosgenite that were sometimes deliberately synthesized, could have had some antimicrobial effects. While we now know lead is toxic, certain lead salts can inhibit bacterial and fungal growth. The Egyptians wouldn't have understood the chemistry, but they might have observed that coal made with these minerals simply lasted longer or seemed cleaner than formulations without them. It's a rather unsettling thought from our perspective, that a toxic substance might also have kept their makeup fresh, but their world was one of different understandings. The oils and animal fats used as binders could also play a role. While some fats can go rancid, others, particularly certain plant oils, possess natural antioxidant or antimicrobial properties. Castor oil, for example, which was widely available and used, has some antimicrobial activity. The oil or fat would also create an anaerobic, oxygen-free, or anoxic, low-oxygen, layer, particularly if the coal paste filled most of its narrow container, which could inhibit the growth of aerobic bacteria. Furthermore, there's evidence and speculation that small amounts of certain resins, like frankincense or myrrh, were sometimes added to coal formulations. These aromatic resins are well known for their potent antimicrobial and antifungal properties and have been used as preservatives for millennia across various cultures. Their inclusion might have been partly for their sacred fragrance or perceived magical qualities, but they could have also significantly contributed to keeping the coal from spoiling, a happy convergence of ritual and practical benefit. It's the ancient equivalent of adding a little rosemary extract to your homemade concoction. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is the possibility that the choice of wood for wooden coal pots might have sometimes been deliberate, with certain woods having natural insect-repelling or antimicrobial properties. While direct evidence for this specific to coal pots is sparse, Egyptians were knowledgeable about different types of wood and their characteristics. It's conceivable that a wood known to resist rot or pests might have been favored for storing something as precious as coal, adding another subtle layer to their preservation strategy. Or perhaps, in a more ritualistic sense, certain woods were simply deemed more pure or protective. Another very practical approach would have been to prepare coal in relatively small batches. Rather than making a giant pot of eyeliner to last for months, it's more likely that individuals or households would grind and mix just enough to last for a shorter period, perhaps a few weeks. This would ensure the coal was always relatively fresh and reduce the chances of significant spoilage before it was used up. This little and often approach is a sensible strategy even today for many homemade preparations. How would they know if their coal had gone bad? They would have relied on their senses. An unusual or rancid smell would be a clear indicator that the oils or fats had turned. A noticeable change in texture, perhaps it became overly dry and crumbly, or conversely, unexpectedly slimy or separated, would also signal a problem. And, of course, if applying the coal caused unusual irritation or an eye infection, that particular batch would likely be discarded, and perhaps its container very thoroughly cleaned, or even abandoned. There might have even been simple household rituals or practices for purifying a coal pot if its contents were suspected of being compromised, though this is largely speculative. The actual effectiveness of their preservation methods, when judged by modern microbiological standards, is a matter of ongoing scholarly debate. While their techniques were undoubtedly clever for their time and technological level, contamination would still have been a risk. However, given the widespread and long-term use of coal, their methods must have been successful enough to make it a viable and generally safe practice within their context. Perhaps that low-dose lead immune stimulation we touched upon earlier even helped counteract minor contaminants sometimes. The ancient world was not a sterile one, and people likely had a more robust baseline immunity to everyday microbes than many of us do today. So, when you imagine that ancient Egyptian carefully capping their coal pot after the nightly ritual, they weren't just tidying up. They were engaging in an act of preservation, ensuring that this vital substance, their shield, their medicine, their connection to beauty and the divine, would remain potent and ready for its next use. The cool stone of the pot, the tight seal of the lid, the inherent properties of the galena and oils, all work together in a silent, ancient collaboration against the forces of decay and contamination. It's another quiet testament to their resourcefulness and their deep understanding of the materials their world provided. You've witnessed the intimate, personal ritual of coal preparation within a household, the careful grinding and mixing passed down through generations. But now, let your mind wander to the broader landscape of ancient Egypt. While home-brewed coal was undoubtedly common, was there also a place for specialists, for true artisans of this vital cosmetic? You begin to uncover the intriguing possibility of skilled individuals and perhaps even dedicated workshops, whose craft it was to produce coal of particular quality or for specific needs, their knowledge guarded and their skills honed. Imagine the bustling marketplace of a larger town like Thebes or Memphis. Amidst the vendors selling grains, linens, pottery, and amulets, might there have been a stall, or even a small shop, dedicated to cosmetics. A place where one could purchase ready-made coal, perhaps of different grades or formulations. While direct, explicit evidence for coal shops is elusive in the way we might find for, say, a baker or a sandal maker, the existence of specialized artisans for other crafts makes it plausible that some individuals focused on producing cosmetics for sale, particularly in urban centers where not everyone might have the time, resources, or skill to make their own from scratch. These artisans of coal, if they existed as distinct professionals, would have possessed a unique set of skills. They would need to be expert geologists of a sort, able to identify and source high-quality raw materials, the best galena with the richest hue, the purest malachite, the correct types of ochre for other pigments. This sourcing itself implies a network. A mainstream historical fact is that minerals like galena and malachite were often mined in the Eastern Desert or the Sinai Peninsula, sometimes through state-sponsored expeditions. These raw materials would then need to be transported, sometimes over considerable distances, to reach the artisans. Our coalmaker would need connections to this trade, or perhaps they were even part of a larger workshop associated with mining operations or temple estates that controlled such resources. Once the raw materials were acquired, the artisan's true craft would come to the fore. Their grinding techniques would be refined, perhaps using specialized tools or methods to achieve an unparalleled fineness and consistency of powder, something a casual home producer might struggle to replicate. They would have known the precise ratios of powder to binder, the best oils or fats to use for longevity and smooth application, and perhaps a secret ingredient or two to make their coal stand out, a particular fragrant resin, a specific herbal extract for added medicinal benefit, or a technique to enhance the color's intensity. Think of them as ancient cosmetic chemists, operating by empirical knowledge and carefully guarded tradition rather than written formulas in a lab. Their lab was their workshop, dusty with minerals and fragrant with oils and incense. Temple workshops are a more certain area where specialized cosmetic production occurred. As you know, coal was essential for the daily rituals of anointing the statues of deities. The demand for high-quality, ritually pure coal for temple use would have been constant. It's highly probable that temple complexes had their own dedicated artisans, perhaps priests or lay workers with specialized training, who produced these sacred cosmetics. Their knowledge would blend craft with religious understanding, ensuring the coal was not only physically perfect but also ritually appropriate, made according to specific, perhaps ancient, prescriptions. The coal used to anoint a munra at Karnak would need to be of the utmost sanctity. This leads to the idea of guarded knowledge. Whether an independent artisan or a temple craftsman, the specific recipes and techniques for producing superior coal would likely have been valuable trade secrets. These wouldn't be broadcast openly but passed down carefully from master to apprentice, perhaps within a family or a closed guild-like structure. Imagine an older artisan, their hands stained with years of working with minerals, quietly instructing a younger apprentice on the subtle art of sifting galena to achieve the perfect velvety texture, or the precise moment to add a drop of myrrh-infused oil to the mixture. This oral tradition, this embodied knowledge, was the bedrock of their craft. If you had the best coal in the neighborhood, you wouldn't want your competitors knowing exactly how you made it, would you? Sorry, that's proprietary ancient magic. Now for a quirky, lesser-known tidbit: if there were indeed specialized coal makers selling their wares, it's fun to speculate about the possibility of brand loyalty or regional specialties. Perhaps the coal from a certain artisan in Thebes was renowned for its intense blackness, while a maker in the Fayum oasis was famed for a particularly soothing medicinal formulation. Travelers might seek out these local specialties, or certain families might have patronized the same coal supplier for generations, trusting in the quality and efficacy of their product. Oh, you must try Ipe's coal when you're in Abydos, darling. It's simply divine and keeps the flies off like nothing else. The extent to which coal production was industrialized on any scale, versus remaining primarily a cottage industry or a localized temple craft, is a matter of some scholarly debate. There probably wasn't a L'Oréal of ancient Egypt with massive factories. However, for a product in such universal and constant demand, some level of organized production beyond individual households, at least for supplying urban markets or large institutions like the royal court and major temples, seems logical. The logistical challenge of sourcing and processing large quantities of minerals alone would suggest a need for some specialization. What about the status of these artisans? Were they revered as skilled artists, akin to a talented sculptor or jeweler? Or were they seen more as humble tradespeople? Their status likely varied. Those producing cosmetics for the pharaoh or the great temples, privy to sacred recipes, probably held a respected position. Independent artisans in a marketplace might have been viewed like any other skilled craftsperson, their reputation built on the quality of their goods and the fairness of their prices. Their names, for the most part, are lost to us, unlike the architects of great monuments or some high-ranking scribes. Yet, their collective skill and dedication were essential to the daily lives and spiritual practices of millions of Egyptians for thousands of years. So, as you consider that perfectly applied line of coal, remember that it might not always have been the result of a purely domestic effort. Behind it could lie a chain of specialized knowledge: the miners who braved the deserts for the raw galena, the traders who transported it, and the skilled hands of an artisan who, with practiced care and perhaps a few well-guarded secrets, transformed dull rock and simple oils into a substance of beauty, power, and divine connection. These unsung artisans were the quiet enablers of Egypt's iconic gaze. You've delved into the who and how of coal creation, from humble home preparations to the potential secrets of specialized artisans. Now, let your focus shift to the artistry of the application itself. The way coal was applied wasn't arbitrary. The lines, curves, and extensions held their own subtle language, a visual vocabulary that could convey beauty, power, divine connection, and perhaps even more nuanced social signals. You're about to explore the different styles of these ancient markings and ponder the layers of meaning they might have carried. The most iconic and instantly recognizable style, a mainstream historical fact evident in countless statues and paintings, is the elongated almond shape. The coal line typically extended from the inner corner of the eye, sweeping along the upper lash line and often the lower one as well, then continuing outwards towards the temple, sometimes with a slight upward curve or a sharp, defined point. This created the impression of a larger, wider, and more arresting eye. This classic line wasn't just a fleeting fashion, it persisted for millennia, a testament to its enduring aesthetic appeal and symbolic resonance. It's the ancient Egyptian equivalent of the little black dress, always elegant, always appropriate. But within this general framework, variations existed. Sometimes you see a single, bold line. Other times, there are distinct double lines, perhaps one thicker and one thinner, running parallel or meeting at the outer corner. The tail or wing, that distinctive flick at the outer edge, could vary in length, thickness, and angle. Some were short and subtle, others long and dramatic, sweeping halfway to the hairline. The thickness of the line around the entire eye could also change, from a delicate trace to a thick, powerful band of black or green. What did these variations signify? Here, we often enter the realm of informed speculation, as the ancient Egyptians didn't leave us detailed style guides explaining their eyeliner choices. However, by looking at broader Egyptian symbolism and artistic conventions, we can infer some potential meanings. One strong influence was undoubtedly the animal kingdom. The elongated, slightly upturned line is strikingly reminiscent of the eye markings of a falcon, the sacred animal of Horus. By mimicking these markings, the wearer, whether pharaoh or commoner, was visually aligning themselves with Horus, invoking his protective power and keen sight. It's a form of sympathetic magic, becoming a little bit like the god through imitation. Similarly, the feline grace and power admired in cats, sacred to goddesses like Bastet, representing domesticity, fertility, and protection, and Sekhmet, the fierce lioness-headed goddess of war and healing, might have influenced certain styles. A particularly sleek, sharp line could evoke a cat-like intensity and mystique. Given the importance of these deities, it's plausible that their animal attributes were consciously emulated in personal adornment. Channeling my inner Bastet today, one might have thought, carefully perfecting that feline flick. The eye itself, Urt in ancient Egyptian, was a potent hieroglyph, representing the act of seeing, and by extension, perception, knowledge, and action. The Khol outline literally emphasized this symbol on the human face, amplifying its inherent power. The Wadjet eye, or Eye of Horus, with its specific combination of a human eye and falcon markings, including the teardrop-like mark beneath the eye often depicted in the symbol, was the ultimate emblem of protection, royal power, and healing. While a full, literal depiction of the Wadjet eye wasn't typically drawn around a person's actual eyes daily, the style of the Khol application, particularly the extended line and sometimes a thicker lower line, clearly referenced and invoked its protective power. It's a matter of scholarly debate just how much precise symbolic meaning was attached to very subtle variations in Khol lines for the average person. Did a slightly longer tail indicate a particular social status, a specific religious affiliation, or was it simply a matter of personal preference or the fashion of the moment, much like how eyeliner styles change today? While clear distinctions for royal or divine figures are often evident in art, as discussed with Pharaoh's sacred lines, the everyday nuances are harder to pin down. It's likely a combination. Broad symbolic associations were widely understood, while finer points might have been more personal or ephemeral. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that Egyptologists and art historians sometimes attempt to categorize different types or styles of Khol lines based on their appearance in dated artworks, trying to see if particular styles correspond to specific dynasties or periods. For example, Old Kingdom eye paint often appears simpler, while New Kingdom depictions can show more elaborate and elongated forms. Some funerary masks or mummy portraits from the Roman period show Khol styles that seem to blend Egyptian traditions with Greco-Roman influences. These studies hint at an evolution of style over time, though distinguishing between artistic representation and actual daily practice is always a challenge. You might also find rare or unusual depictions on ostraca, limestone or pottery sherds used for sketches that show experimental or less formal eye makeup styles, giving a glimpse beyond the highly stylized official art. The very act of extending the eye line outwards could also have a practical aesthetic purpose, to create an illusion of a larger, more open eye, which was considered beautiful and a sign of alertness and vitality. In the often dim light of homes lit by oil lamps, or when encountering someone in the bright sunlight, eyes defined and enlarged by Khol would appear more expressive and captivating. Could the style also indicate something about the wearer's role or even their mood? It's tempting to imagine a priest or priestess adopting a particularly stylized application for certain rituals, or a dancer using a more dramatic look to enhance their performance. Perhaps a more subdued line was favored for daily work, and a bolder one for festivals or celebrations. While we lack direct textual evidence for such specific correlations in daily life, it's a natural human tendency to use adornment to express different facets of identity or to suit different occasions. Consider, too, the tools. The shape of the applicator stick, whether it had a fine point, a rounded end, or a flattened edge, would influence the type of line that could be easily produced. An artisan producing these sticks might even have created different types for achieving specific fashionable looks, the ancient equivalent of our various eyeliner brushes and pens. The interplay between black Khol, Mesdemet, and green eye paint, Uju, also offered stylistic possibilities. Sometimes they were used separately, but occasionally depictions suggest they might have been used together, perhaps green on the eyelid and black along the lash line and for the extended tail, creating a more complex and colorful effect. This would have added another layer of symbolic meaning, combining the protective black with the regenerative green. Ultimately, the markings around an ancient Egyptian's eyes were a powerful form of nonverbal communication. They signaled cultural identity, an awareness of spiritual forces, a desire for beauty and protection, and a connection to the divine. Whether the specific flick of an eyeliner tail was meant to convey a precise, forgotten meaning or was simply what looked good that decade, the overall impact was undeniable. It transformed the human face, imbuing the gaze with an intensity and a timeless mystique that continues to fascinate us thousands of years later. Each line was a brushstroke in the daily portrait of a civilization. Having admired the diverse styles and symbolic meanings woven into Egyptian Khol markings, you now let your gaze drift beyond the fertile Nile Valley, across the shimmering deserts and the blue expanse of the Mediterranean, to consider the echoes of this practice in neighboring lands. Ancient Egypt was not an isolated civilization, it was a vibrant hub connected by trade routes, diplomatic missions, and sometimes conflict, with cultures across Africa, the Near East, and the Aegean. It's only natural to wonder how these interactions might have influenced, or been influenced by, Egypt's profound tradition of eye adornment. Did the allure of the Khol-lined eye ripple outwards, or did Egypt itself occasionally borrow a cosmetic flourish from afar? To the south lay Nubia, the land of Kush, a powerful kingdom with which Egypt shared a long and complex history, alternating between periods of peaceful trade, cultural exchange, and outright Egyptian domination or, at times, Nubian rule over Egypt itself. It's a well-established historical fact that Nubian culture was deeply intertwined with Egyptian practices, and this extended to cosmetics. Archaeological finds in Nubian sites have unearthed Khol pots and applicators strikingly similar to Egyptian ones. Nubian art, too, often depicts figures with Khol-lined eyes, suggesting a shared aesthetic and similar beliefs regarding the protective and beautifying properties of eye makeup. The influence likely flowed both ways at different times, but the prestige of Egyptian culture, particularly during periods of its strength, meant its cosmetic traditions were often emulated or adapted by its southern neighbors. Imagine Nubian royalty, perhaps, adopting certain Egyptian Khol styles as a mark of sophistication or power. Moving northeast, into the Levant, the lands of Canaan, Syria, and Phoenicia, extensive trade routes connected these regions with Egypt. Egyptian goods, including luxury items and raw materials for cosmetics like certain oils or resins, flowed into these areas, and Levantine goods found their way to Egypt. It's highly probable that Khol, or at least the knowledge of its use and preparation, was part of this exchange. Small Egyptian-style Khol pots have been discovered in archaeological contexts in the Levant, testament to these ancient connections. Whether the local populations fully adopted Egyptian beliefs surrounding Khol, or primarily appreciated its aesthetic and practical benefits like sun glare reduction, is harder to ascertain, but the visual impact of the Khol-lined eye was undeniably potent. Perhaps Levantine traders, seeing the Egyptians' resilience under the harsh sun, thought, there might be something to that eye paint after all, besides making them look rather imposing. To Egypt's west lay the lands of the Libyans, various tribal groups inhabiting the western desert. While often depicted as enemies in Egyptian art, there were also periods of trade and cultural interchange. Libyan chieftains are sometimes shown in Egyptian reliefs with certain Egyptianate adornments, and it's conceivable that cosmetic practices like the use of Khol could have been adopted by some Libyan groups, particularly those living closer to the Nile Valley or those who served as mercenaries in Egyptian armies. The desert environment would certainly have made Khol's protective qualities against sun and dust appealing. Across the Mediterranean, the Minoan civilization on Crete and later the Mycenaeans on mainland Greece had established trade links with Egypt, particularly during the New Kingdom. While their artistic styles and cosmetic practices were distinct, some Egyptian influences can be traced in Aegean art. Whether Khol use, in the Egyptian style, became widespread in these cultures is less clear. They had their own forms of adornment, but the striking appearance of Egyptian dignitaries or traders, their eyes defined by dark Khol, would surely have been noted. It's a matter of ongoing scholarly debate just how deeply Egyptian cosmetic ideals penetrated Aegean societies, or whether similarities in eye emphasis in art are due to direct borrowing or simply a shared human aesthetic for highlighting the eyes. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is the linguistic side of things. Sometimes, tracking the etymology of words related to cosmetics can offer clues about cultural exchange. While it's a complex field, if a word for eye paint or a specific cosmetic ingredient in a neighboring culture's language bore a resemblance to an Egyptian term, it might suggest a borrowing of the practice or material. For instance, the word khol itself has Semitic roots, related to Arabic khul, and its journey through various languages reflects the widespread and enduring nature of this cosmetic practice across the Middle East and beyond, with Egypt being a major ancient proponent. The famed land of Punt, located somewhere to the southeast of Egypt, its exact location is still debated, possibly on the Horn of Africa or the Arabian Peninsula, was a source of exotic goods highly prized by the Egyptians, including incense like myrrh and frankincense, ebony, and gold. These expeditions to Punt, famously depicted in Queen Hatshepsut's temple at Deir el-Bahri, involved significant cultural contact. It's plausible that cosmetic ingredients, and perhaps even ideas about adornment, traveled along these routes. While Punt was a source for Egypt, the Egyptians arriving in their impressive ships, adorned and accoutred, would have also presented a striking image to the Puntites. Was Egypt always the exporter of cosmetic culture, the trendsetter of the ancient world? Given its immense cultural prestige, its advanced material culture, and the sheer longevity and ubiquity of its Khol tradition, Egypt was undoubtedly a major influencer. The iconic image of the kohl-lined Egyptian eye became almost synonymous with the civilization itself. However, it would be an oversimplification to assume influence flowed only in one direction. Ancient cultures were more dynamic and interconnected than we sometimes give them credit for. Egypt, throughout its long history, also absorbed foreign technologies, deities, and artistic styles. It's conceivable that specific ingredients, or perhaps subtle stylistic variations in adornment, might have been adopted from neighboring cultures if they were perceived as beautiful, potent, or exotic. For instance, a particular type of fragrant oil favored by Syrian traders might have found its way into an Egyptian perfumer's or kohl maker's repertoire. The challenge lies in distinguishing between direct influence, independent parallel development, where different cultures arrive at similar solutions or aesthetics due to similar environmental or social factors, and shared regional traditions that predate strong Egyptian dominance. The use of eye paint to reduce sun glare, for example, might have arisen independently in several sunny climates. However, the specific styles, the complex ritual associations, and the particular chemical makeup of Egyptian kohl, especially the lead-based compounds, point to a tradition with a strong, identifiable core that likely did radiate outwards. So, as you imagine the ancient Egyptian applying their nightly kohl, picture also the subtle, far-reaching tendrils of this practice. A trader in a Canaanite port city, perhaps, experimenting with a gift of Egyptian kohl. A Nubian queen adopting the latest Theban eye makeup style. The scent of Egyptian incense, and perhaps the dark gleam of its cosmetics, carried on ships across the sea. The kohl-lined eye was not just an Egyptian phenomenon, it was a significant part of the cultural currency of the ancient Eastern Mediterranean and African world, a testament to Egypt's enduring impact on the aesthetics and rituals of its neighbors. As our journey through the lamplit rooms and sun-drenched landscapes of ancient Egypt draws towards a gentle close, you ponder the remarkable tenacity of this simple, yet profound, practice. The nightly ritual of applying kohl, so steeped in protection, divinity, and beauty, did not simply vanish with the last pharaohs or the crumbling of ancient temples. Instead, kohl's lasting shadow stretches across millennia, its dark, alluring line weaving through cultures and across continents, leaving an indelible mark on beauty practices right up to the present day. The immediate successors to pharaonic power in Egypt, the Greeks and Romans, certainly had their own established cosmetic traditions. Roman women, for instance, used a variety of substances to adorn their eyes, including soot and antimony. However, in Roman Egypt itself, the ancient traditions often blended with new influences, and the use of kohl-like eye paints persisted. The allure of the exotic, mysterious Egyptian gaze, already ancient by that time, likely held a certain fascination. But it's in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia that the lineage of ancient Egyptian kohl is most direct and unbroken. This is a mainstream historical fact. The traditional eye cosmetics known as kohl in Arabic, or surma, or kajol in various South Asian languages, are direct descendants of these ancient practices. For centuries, and continuing robustly today, these substances have been used by men, women, and children, not just for beauty, but also for perceived health benefits, such as cooling the eyes, improving vision, and, much like in ancient Egypt, protecting against the evil eye and harsh sunlight. The methods of preparation, often involving the grinding of galena or other minerals like antimony sulfide, and the application with a special stick or probe, echo those ancient Egyptian techniques with uncanny similarity. The cultural and sometimes religious significance attached to Khol in these regions, as a marker of marital status, a part of festive adornment, or a sunnah, practice of the Prophet Muhammad, in some Islamic traditions, underscores its deep, enduring importance. The pathway by which these practices were transmitted from ancient Egypt to these vast regions is a complex tapestry woven from trade, conquest, and cultural diffusion over thousands of years. Whether all Khol traditions in these areas stem solely from Egypt, or if there were also independent, parallel developments that later syncretized, is a subject of ongoing scholarly discussion and exploration. However, Egypt's role as a major ancient progenitor and popularizer of this specific cosmetic form is widely acknowledged. Centuries later, the Western world would have its own dramatic re-encounter with ancient Egyptian aesthetics. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 unleashed a tidal wave of Egyptomania that swept through art, architecture, and fashion in the 1920s. Suddenly, the striking, heavily lined eye seen in ancient tomb paintings and on artifacts became the height of modern style. The flapper look, with its bold, dark eyeliner extending outwards, was a direct nod to this ancient allure. Actresses in silent films, their eyes needing to convey emotion dramatically without words, adopted these intense, kohl-rimmed gazes, popularizing the look globally. That dramatic, ancient stare was reborn for the silver screen. And from there, the influence continues. Think of the classic cat-eye eyeliner, a perennial favorite from the mid-20th century to today. Its winged flick is a direct descendant of those ancient Egyptian lines, designed to elongate and lift the eye. That smoky eye, with its blended, diffused darkness, evokes the intensity and mystery of ancient Khol application. Every time someone carefully draws a line of black eyeliner, they are, consciously or not, participating in a cosmetic tradition that stretches back over 5,000 years, to those early experiments with galena and malachite along the banks of the Nile. A quirky, and somewhat concerning, tidbit is that even in modern times, some traditional Khol or surma products, particularly those sold in informal markets in parts of Asia and Africa, still contain high levels of lead from galena. While many commercially produced eyeliners today use safe, modern pigments like carbon black or iron oxides, these traditional forms persist, driven by cultural preference and belief in their specific properties, despite public health warnings. It's a testament to the incredible strength of tradition, even when it brushes up against modern scientific understanding. Why has this practice of darkening and defining the eyes held such enduring power? Perhaps it's because the eyes are so central to human expression and connection. To outline them is to draw attention to our gaze, to intensify our perceived emotions, to create an aura of mystery or authority. The ancient Egyptians understood this instinctively, and they harnessed it with remarkable artistry and profound symbolic meaning. They recognized that to line the eye was not just to beautify it, but to empower it, to make it a more potent instrument of both seeing and being seen. The legacy of Egyptian Khol is not just in the specific products or styles, but in the very idea that cosmetics can be transformative, a shield, a statement, a connection to something ancient and powerful. It's in the ritual of application, that quiet moment of self-creation before facing the world, or, as we've seen, before facing eternity. That small pot of dark powder, born from the earth of Egypt, has cast a very long and very beautiful shadow indeed. Narrative part word count, approx 1450. Wind down. And so, as the last traces of that ancient, sacred Khol seem to shimmer and fade in the soft lamplight of your imagination, you feel the story gently drawing to its close. The vibrant world of ancient Egypt, with its deep reverence for the seen and unseen, begins to recede, like the slow, majestic flow of the Nile itself as it journeys towards the vast, unknowable sea. The bustling daytime activities, the hushed nightly rituals, the meticulous preparations for both this life and the next, all now settle into the quiet annals of history, yet their echoes linger, soft and persistent. You might still picture those coal-lined eyes, gazing out from millennia past, eyes that witnessed the rising of countless suns over the desert horizon, eyes that reflected the flicker of sacred fires in temple sanctuaries, eyes that sought protection, beauty, and a connection to the eternal. Allow that image to soften, to become less distinct, like a watercolor painting left in a gentle morning mist. The details blur, but the essence, the feeling, remains, a sense of profound artistry, deep belief, and a human touch reaching out across the ages. The gentle rhythm of the pestle grinding galena, the soft scrape of the applicator in its pot, the focus gaze into a polished bronze mirror, these small, intimate sounds and actions now become part of a larger, more encompassing quietude. Let the gentle humor and the intriguing facts we've explored together dissolve into a comfortable sense of peacefulness. There are no more obscure details to uncover tonight, no more surprising connections to make. Just the gentle understanding that even in the most ancient of practices, there lies a common thread of human experience, the desire to adorn, to protect, to understand, and to be remembered. The desert night, which once cradled these rituals, now seems to cradle your own sense of sleepy curiosity. The air grows stiller, the shadows deeper and more comforting. The weight of history, once so vivid, now feels light, like a soft blanket settling around you. There's nothing more to learn for now, nothing more to see. It's time for your own nightly ritual of rest, a letting go into the quiet darkness, much like the ancient Egyptians let go of the day, trusting in the protection of their beliefs and the coming of a new dawn. Feel any remaining tension just melt away. Let the stories rest. Let your mind be still. Sweet dreams.